Today we will be discussing the procedure for loading a flintlock musket. But before we go into how to load a flintlock, first let's talk a little bit about the history of guns. Gunpowder was first invented in China, but it was primarily used for fireworks. It wasn't until Europeans started using gunpowder that it was refined for weapons. Enter the handgun. The handgun was the first official firearm. It was simple, but effective. The handgun was basically a mini cannon barrel mounted to a 4 to 6 foot wooden shaft. It was fired by loading powder and ball through the front of the barrel, then touching a burning piece of rope called the match cord to the powder through a small hole at the back of the barrel, setting off the powder and essentially firing the weapon. Through years of practical use and battlefield testing, the barrel was eventually mounted to a wooden stock and the match cord incorporated onto the weapon, thus giving way to the arquebus musket and then the matchlock. Eventually, new technology of using a simple flint rock and a steel striking surface called a frizzen was used to create a shower of sparks to set off the main charge of powder, ultimately replacing the burning match cord and giving way to the flintlock. The flintlock technology changed the ignition system from a piece of burning rope or match cord to a piece of flint and steel striking surface, this making the weapon much more reliable and easier to carry. All of this combining to give us the iconic weapon of the American Revolution. Now let's take a moment to talk about some of the required gear. Pay attention, because these are going to be the items we're going to be using to load our flintlock. What you see before you from left to right is your powder containers, your projectiles, cleaning equipment, and powder measuring devices. And here you have your powder horn and priming horn. The powder horn contains a larger grainage of powder used for your main charge that goes down the barrel, and your priming horn contains a small, finer powder that you use for priming your pan. Starting from the top, you have birdshot, buckshot, 75 caliber round ball, patches which are used for your round ball, your cleaning worm, olive oil, and your patch knife for cutting patches. Here you have your rag, your beeswax, which used in incorporation with your olive oil can actually form a grease that keeps away rust. Then on the other side you have your ball starter, which assists in loading your round ball, your powder measurer, which goes from 0 to 120 grains, and your powder flask. The powder flask is used to prime the pan and contains a finer grainage of powder similar to the powder horn, but it's a more modern use. Now that you understand the tools and material we will need, we can begin the loading procedure. First, take your powder horn and measure out 120 grains. Next, pour the powder down the barrel. Then take your cotton patch and put it over the barrel. Place your round ball in the center of the patch and press it into the barrel firmly. Then take your ball starter to shove the ball into the barrel. Next, take your ramrod and shove the ball down the barrel, making sure it seats firmly against the powder. This is important because if there is any gap between the ball and the powder, it will create an air pocket that will blow your barrel. Now that we have the barrel loaded with powder and ball, we must prime the pan with powder. Close the frizzen and pull the hammer back to full cock. Now we are ready to fire. When the trigger is pulled, the hammer holding the flint rock flies forward. Making contact with the frizzen, it creates a shower of sparks. Sparks fall into the pan and set off the powder, thus creating a flame that sets off the main charge in the barrel, sending the ball towards its intended target. Then finalizing the firing of the weapon. Finally, the best part about everything is actually being able to shoot the weapon. Well, I hope you enjoyed the presentation.